Many of us keep an eye on what's going on with Ocasio-Cortez because she's anomalous, she's new, she has far-left politics, and she's rapidly rising in the ranks of the Democratic Party. With over 4 million followers, what's going on with her is particularly newsworthy. There's certainly many other Congress people who aren't as newsworthy. So this is why I want to do a video about her latest poll. Ocasio-Cortez devastated in new poll from inside her district. The story from the Daily Wire talks about how, though there has been an waxing and waning of her favorability, her unfavorability, my understanding, is now very high, 2-1. And so we also have an op-ed here from Washington Examiner. Again, these are both conservative outlets who are going to be taking a critical approach to her polls. So I'll definitely be commenting on that. But before we get started and looking at why people don't like her anymore, I don't know if they ever did, go to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly donation option, a crypto option, a physical address, and of course, liking and commenting, some of the best things you can do. Engagement really helps, as does sharing and subscribing. From the Daily Wire, a new poll from inside Socialist Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's 14th congressional district has found that among registered voters, the far-left congresswoman is deeply unpopular. The door-to-door poll from Stop the AOC PAC yielded the following key results. They don't like her. She has a more than 2-to-1 ratio of unfavorable to favorable in public opinion. They don't trust her. Only 10.75% thought she had their best interests in mind in quashing the Amazon deal. 32.6% said she didn't. They don't want her. 33.44% are ready to vote against her, and only 13.3% would vote for her. But let's just make sure we make it very clear. Stop the AOC PAC clearly has an agenda when it comes to these polls. And you don't know necessarily what questions they were asked. We can potentially look at them. But I would also stress there's an inversion that is true as well. Many of the polls done by groups that favor Ocasio-Cortez would invert them as well. So take it all with a grain of salt. The story says, the poll also found that a plurality of Ocasio-Cortez's district did not agree with her decision to sabotage the Amazon deal, which would have brought tens of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity to her district. My understanding is that Amazon would not have been in her district, but there would have been people living in the area. Ocasio-Cortez has now tried to backpedal, claiming she had nothing to do with Amazon pulling out. But I want to make sure I stress, Ocasio-Cortez headlined a protest in the financial district in New York to oppose and obstruct the Amazon deal. Very devastating to New York, who really needed the new revenue to repair their crumbling infrastructure like the MTA. The final analysis from the poll stated, facing an electorate more concerned with results than retweets, Ocasio-Cortez has problems in her backyard. Despite her online notoriety and fandom in the national New Progressive movement, the citizens of New York District 14 want a representative aligned with their values. After surveying voters in 2,261 homes in the district, it's clear Ocasio-Cortez is not the model for hope and change she sold herself to be. The opportunity for a new voice is prevalent, and the electorate is ready to take action in 2020. The results from the Stop the AOC PAC poll are just the latest devastating numbers Ocasio-Cortez had to face over her job performance. In March, I said Marx because I mixed March and Vox. Vox reported that a Quinnipiac poll released on Thursday morning found that 23% of Americans had a favorable view of Cortez, while 36% had an unfavorable view. However, I want to make sure I stress there were polls in between that showing that her ratings, her favorability went up. So you can very easily pull a specific poll from back then to claim that, she was doing really bad, and she still is. But there's been a wax and a waning. She's done some things, people really liked it, and then she's done bad things and people have retracted, and it goes back and forth. They say that in March, the Daily Wire also reported the findings of this Siena College poll of New Yorkers taken between March 10th and 14th prompted Siena College pollster Stephen Greenberg to say only 12% call her a hero, while 38% label her a villain. Well, let's pop up this year's story from the Washington Examiner. Opinion. And this goes more in depth on the poll. And so we actually have the questions asked. And I want to take a look at the questions to see if there's any bias in the framing of the narrative, because this PAC clearly doesn't like Ocasio-Cortez. So, pollsters love asking loaded questions, because they want to publish stories saying like, oh, her polls are really bad. hoping that people would rather vote for a victor instead of a loser, and if they think her polls are bad, nobody wants to be in the outgroup. So here we have, let's start just with a little preface of what the story is. They say, a new door-to-door survey found that she has a low 21% favorability rating. The survey of registered voters was conducted by the Political Action Committee, targeting her with a Federal Election Commission complaint. A previous survey for the group found that residents were upset with the lawmakers' opposition to Amazon, just so we know where they're going with it. And they say the key findings, 42% are unfamiliar with AOC, 51% have an unfavorable view, 33% are ready to vote against her. So let's look at these questions. The first questions. Hi, my name is name, and I am a student activist concerned about our community. Our Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected to represent us last year. Are you familiar with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Familiar, unfamiliar, refused. So we can see that 58% were familiar. They said that, right? Yes. And 41.73 were unfamiliar. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Cortez? And okay, so it looks like the questions are legit. I'm satisfied with that. Do you support allowing businesses like Amazon to move here and hire thousands of new jobs? Support Amazon, 36%, unsure, 55%, and does not support Amazon, 8%. Do you believe politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had our community's best interest in mind when they forced Amazon out of Queens? And unsure was 56%. This seems fairly legit. The only question these final two questions I would take issue with, but if they ask them in this order, then I think we're looking at some legitimate responses. So let me just explain my thought process on these questions. When they say, do you believe that Cortez had our community's best interest in mind when they forced Amazon out of Queens? That takes a very direct approach to what I would say is a framing of the narrative. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't necessarily force Amazon out of Queens. I don't know how you could ask that question better because she played a role in that. Perhaps you could say something like, do you believe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had our community's best interest in mind when she led protests to block Amazon coming into Queens? And then I'm sure you would have gotten a very similar response. So I'm not super unhappy with it. They said, will you pledge to oppose Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in our next election? Yes, 33% said they would oppose, 53% were unsure. I don't like that question. That's a direct question. I would rather ask, in the next election, would you support or would you oppose Ocasio-Cortez? And then you could have oppose, support, etc. Let's read on a little bit. Facing an electorate more concerned with the results than retweets. Okay, we read that already. Backer said that he hopes potential opponents act on his survey results and take on Ocasio-Cortez. She does not have a strong constituency outside her core support group. I would stress, neither did Joe Crowley. Listen, so let's analyze this, right? So for those that are familiar, Ocasio-Cortez won using an exploit, primarying. Most people just vote Democrat. They know this. Even Nancy Pelosi said a glass of water with a D on it would win in her or Ocasio-Cortez's district because people will just vote for the Democrat. So most people, as we can see, don't even know who she is. 27% were unsure if they were favorable. Here, wait, hold on. This is really interesting. I wonder if they framed these if they did the math on these questions for only people who knew who she was. Because look, if 41% are unfamiliar, why would 27% be unsure? Unless they only count those who are familiar with her. I don't know. Hopefully they did. But here's what I want to point out. Ocasio-Cortez won with something like 16 or 17,000 votes in a district of 700,000 people. And only 50% were, 41% were unfamiliar with her. I guess she is really, really famous. Whether or not she can win in her next upcoming election, which is 2020, is to be seen. In her initial primary run, she won because activists were activated. And they didn't need that many votes to get rid of Joe Crowley. And Joe Crowley, nobody knew who he was. I didn't know who he was. But if nobody was going to come out to vote for him, people didn't know him. It's entirely possible more people did know who he was, but don't know anything about primaries. So they were like, when's the vote? And thus, Ocasio-Cortez got into an exploit. The companies that she worked with to do this, they knew what they were doing. That was their strategy. Since then, she's become very famous, which is probably going to get her a ton of support, and she will be very difficult to defeat. Take that into consideration. She's very famous, and there are a lot more people who know who she is now today than they did, a year ago. But we can see that if this poll is correct, her unfavorability is really high. And that's kind of scary, especially for New York District. I wonder if that could lead to a Republican victory. Serious question. I'll leave it there. Stick around. I got more segments coming up in a few moments, and I will see you soon.